sometimes we can get so much in our own heads, kind of over-analyzing, second-guessing everything. And if there's anything you can do to kind of get out of your head a little bit and just be more mindfully in the moment, whether it's with art or sculpture or writing, I think that could be helpful to creativity.
Welcome to the Origins of Creativity podcast, brought to you by Bookling Media, where we discover the magic behind creativity through the stories of passionate creators. Listen in and fill your creative vessel with delightful insights and uplifting tales.
Hello, you are listening to the Origins of Creativity podcast. I'm your host, Becky Garish. Today we'll be talking about the writer's journey and becoming a published author. We're going to get a glimpse into how one writer approaches her genre. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app. This way you won't miss the next episode and it helps others find us. My guest today is a writer friend. She is a New York Times bestselling author, seeing amazing success with her books, and I've had the pleasure of knowing her for many years. Over the course of her writing career, she has written 4 books for young adults and even a book for Disney. If that isn't enough, she received her doctorate degree in psychology and teaches psychology as a senior lecturer at The Ohio State University. In her spare time, she volunteers as a board member with the Central and Southern Ohio chapter of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. I'm impressed with her ability to balance both her teaching and writing career. I'm thrilled to have you join me on the show, Kristy Boyce.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today.
Great. Yes, I'm so excited to have you as our first guest here on the Origins of Creativity podcast. And I think congratulations are in order for your latest book making the New York Times bestseller list. How do you feel about that?
What can I even say? It is such a dream come true. One of those things that you kind of have in the back of your mind, but also kind of figure is probably not going to happen. And then when it did, it's been weeks and I'm still kind of processing it, but obviously incredibly overjoyed. And really what it means is that the book is getting into the hands of more readers. And that's what is always the goal, right? Is to be able to have readers kind of get a hold of your book and hopefully get something from it. So it's a real joy. And I'm so excited about the whole thing.
Yes, I am too, and it's been fun watching and being a part of the journey as we've been together in the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and seeing where you come from and where it's gone, and just it's exciting to see. So let's just jump in. I'd love to know, and I know our listeners would love to know a little bit more about your books, especially your latest book, Dating and Dragons.
Absolutely. So I write young adult rom-coms. Like you said, I have 4 books out right now, another one coming out next year. And so overall, I would describe them as light, happy, joyful books. I'm always kind of thinking of them as something that would be a good thing to read if, the day is feeling a little bit dark and you need a little punch of joy in your life, then hopefully these books will do it. And my latest 2 are both inspired by D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So this latest one is called Dating and Dragons, and it is about a girl she's kind of had some issues with her friends in a past high school experience, and now she's moved to a new high school, and she's really motivated and hoping to make a new set of friends, and is hoping that if she can find a D&D group to join, that might be the easiest way to do that. And she does luckily find a D&D group. However, when she gets to the first session, she realizes that they're much more serious than what she's used to because they live stream all of their games, much like groups like Critical Role. They also have a lot of really serious rules about this. So, for instance, you can never skip a session, you can't leave early, and you can't date any of the players. Now, that would not usually be an issue, except that one of the people who's at the game table with her also happens to be the cute boy she had met on the first day of high school. And so she realizes that by joining this group, she's giving up on the opportunity to possibly see what might happen with him later on down the road. So then we'll see, as the book goes on, we'll kind of see how that all shakes out for Quinn and Logan.
That is so cool. I think that's a great tie-in with Dungeons and Dragons and how popular it has become, where people are disconnecting and getting offline and getting into things that aren't so heavy. So I think it's just a great timing for everyone to be able to enjoy your book and escape in their own world, you know. And it kind of leads me to the thought of, how did it take to get here? I know a lot of aspiring writers are reading your book and thinking, this is fun. I want to actually write again. I want, you know, and you're inspiring them. And so for our listeners who are looking into writing on their own, what did it take to get where you are today? I know this isn't a very long podcast, but we would love to know the basics, I guess, of how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. I was chuckling as you said that because, yeah, it could take an hour or a month-long podcast to kind of go through all the details of that. So, yeah, we'll kind of hit the highlights. I mean, you know, for somebody who's kind of earlier in their journey, I think the first thing to know is that it probably will be a longer journey, and that's totally okay and normal. Everybody kind of, this happens for them at different points in time. For me, you know, I was writing as early as childhood, but it was not until after I finished my PhD and after I had my son that I got really serious. So I'd kind of like dipped my toe into it. I thought I was getting serious in 2008, but at that point in time, I wasn't sharing my work with anybody, and I wasn't a part of our writing organization. I didn't have writer friends. And I think that was a really important part of my journey. So it wasn't until 2013 that I joined that group. I started to be, I guess, courageous enough to share my work with other people, to get that feedback that you really need, and to start doing things like going to conferences or going to writing workshops and learning. And so that journey lasted, gosh, I don't even know. I mean, my first book came out in 2021, so a little less than 10 years. But again, it had even been more before that. But I think another big step was finding a mentorship program. Those can sometimes be hard to find nowadays, but I had some mentors who really helped me with one of my YA manuscripts, and that made the difference of me getting to sign with my agent. That was in 2019, and then I sold that book in 2019, and it usually takes about 2 years between when you sign to when the book comes out. So that's why my first book came out in 2021. So, but, you know, in between that, I had written multiple other manuscripts. I had queried those with agents. I had gotten tons of rejections. I'd given up and come back to it. So, you know, the journey was a long one with lots of, you know, it's all fun and great now to say, ooh, New York Times bestseller, but it takes a lot of steps and a ton of rejection to get to that point. And I think it's good for everybody to know that, not in a negative way, but just in a setting expectations sort of way, so that we can know what's going on and just kind of keep plowing forward, even when there's those hurdles that you have to get through.
That's so true, especially with, you know, the unknown of, you know, there's a luck to it sometimes with what list it might, you know, may or may not, no matter how good. And that's hard, you know, and like you said, with rejections, I remember in SCBWI, you would do a yearly rejection bingo.
Oh, right.
And we would, you know, who got this response, this, you know, did we get a no, I'll pass this time, or, you know, and you know, kept it lighthearted too, in that setting, where people are all trying, and you know, we're gonna hear no way more than yes. And I think, like you were saying, it's just keep going, and, you know, just doing what you need to do to make it happen. So when it comes to, okay, so you've written, you've put the time into it, you really got serious on it. Before you got serious into it, were you doing a lot of other creative things, or, you know, were you dabbling in writing? Were you still, you know, any of that?
Yeah, I was. I feel like I always needed to have some kind of creative outlet, really, throughout my entire life. Even in grad school, before, I mean, I was kind of writing throughout my life, but I never really thought I could become a professional author, so I didn't take it very seriously. So, like, in grad school, I was quilting because I don't know why. Like, it's something to do with my hands and something fun, a little bit mindless in some sort of ways. Not that it doesn't take a lot of talent and effort, but at the same time, it's not the same kind of thing that I was doing in grad school. So, yeah, in those early days, like, I had finished my PhD, I was, again, technically writing, but I do kind of laugh at myself because I was, quote, taking it seriously, but I probably was, you know, maybe writing once a week, if that. I'd write for a little bit, and I just did a bunch of other stuff. I was really into gardening, and again, a lot of quilting and sewing types of things. I've always loved scrapbooking, which is, I guess it's a creative outlet. It's a little bit different, but it's, you know, the stickers and the pens and all those kinds of things. And so anything kind of that I could do, like a crafty kind of thing with my hands, I've always liked to do that. You know, now there's only so much time in the day. So I'm kind of sad about it because I've had to give up on some of those more other creative pursuits. And there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe at some point in time I'll get back to that. It just isn't right now. But obviously I have to put my time towards the thing that I'm most passionate about. And I'm so grateful to be in this position. But who knows, when I retire, I'm going to get back into the quilting. I'll be the stereotypical woman quilting on her chair with a cat on her lap or something like that.
Oh, I
Sounds
love it.
amazing.
No, that's very true. I mean, I think with creatives, we have so many things that we want to do. We have so many outlets that we want to explore. And it's, when you get to the point where you're, doing this professionally and on top of, working at the Ohio State University, you're going to have things that you can't do as much. And that makes a lot of sense. And I remember in your first book, Hot British Boyfriend, there were fairy gardens that the characters, enjoyed. And that was part of your own creative outlet then as well. You would have these really cool fairy gardens and just this whimsical thing that it's just so cool. And, creativity, like you said, it could be really, really intense, or it can be more easygoing depending on how much you want to put into it. And that's very, very true. And it does kind of put that pressure on you to focus more on the one thing and not everything else. But so when you are working on a book, and you've got an idea in your head, how do you begin with dialogue? How do you begin with the characters? How do you lay it all out so that you've got somewhere to go with it? Because I know a lot of people who are attempting to write or have started, they sort of start to fall apart in the middle of the book. They don't know what to do, So how do you put that all together?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, let me first just start by saying that there is not the one right answer. So, I mean, I'll just give what I do, but, take it with a grain of salt and maybe it won't resonate with everybody. For me, I'm somebody who starts with a premise. So some people really start with a particular character that's popped into their head and they can hear their voice and they know their personality. And I'm kind of the opposite. So oftentimes I have this kind of general idea, what if a girl wants to join a new D&D group and the group is a live streaming D&D group? And I have to kind of start with premise and then learn about the character as I'm writing. I usually have some idea of the main plot points, particularly now because I have to run the stuff past an editor at a publishing house before I can start working on it. But even before this, I wasn't a huge outliner. Some people love it, and I don't want to say not to do it. I think for some people that really is the thing that helps them to get through it. For me, I just like to know certain, I guess I'll call them like plot beats or certain points, like, maybe a quarter of the way through X should happen. And by the halfway point, this thing is going to change. And, that's usually romance related since I'm writing rom-coms. So maybe at the halfway point, the main character realizes that she's actually starting to fall for the guy. So I know those things, but I don't know every single scene that's going to happen in between. And I like that because it gives me some structure, but it also gives me some flexibility so that the creativity can come out. And maybe, as I'm writing or as I'm, taking a walk, this idea will come to me. And if I have every single thing outlined, sometimes it feels like it's too constricting. Again, for other people, they love that and they need it. So that's just kind of how I do it. And I usually am doing multiple drafts. So the first draft is more plot based. And then I go back again and try to kind of build in and layer in deeper characters, because at first they're very kind of wooden and, two-dimensional and things like that.
When you mentioned the 2D aspect of character building, I was thinking in my mind all of a sudden of sculpture. You're taking a story and you're putting it into words. And for so many other creatives, they're taking a story and sculpting it. They're taking a story and painting it. And I find it really fascinating that different characters or different parts of a piece can have dimension. And, you're building that. So I think that is something that people might not consider. And I hadn't really thought of that before when it came to writing a character. So that was really cool to imagine. And I know this about you, so I am going to kind of put that out here that, when you said you take walks, I'm not sure if you're happy to share what you're doing when you're on your walks.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sometimes, people will talk about writer's block, and I never know exactly what to say. Is that a true thing? Is it not? Is it real? But there's definitely times where, if nothing else, I'll sit in front of my laptop and I'm like, I hate every single thing I'm writing. Every word is wrong. I'm second guessing it. And so one of the things that can get me out of my own head with that is to go for walks with my phone. And I put on, it's not even really a dictation app. It's just, I have an iPhone and I just open the notes app and I hit the voice to text button and I just start talking. And it's bad. And sometimes there's like awkward pauses. There's going to certainly be lots of autocorrects and, those kinds of issues. But the thing that I love about it is that it frees my mind to just let the words flow and let the dialogue flow. And it really is the case that sometimes as I'm walking along, there'll be something that happens in the scene that just livens it up or it makes it more exciting. And I'm just not sure I could have gotten there had I been sitting and kind of in my head, second guessing every single sentence that I write. So again, everybody has to do their own thing, but that's like my quirky thing that I do is I go for walks and I talk to myself, and my neighbors think I'm on the phone, but I'm really not.
I love that. Well, at least I think you're on the phone.
Yeah.
Mine would think I was just talking to myself, but I love that. I just think, that's taking you out, like you were saying, with the 2D and the character, like that's taking your brain away from the writing and you're almost into another way of almost play acting
Yeah.
and theatrical, and it takes you out of that world. So maybe you could see it a different way. And I could see painters doing this where they're having trouble with their image. They could write it down as if it's a play or a scene,
Oh, yeah.
maybe. And they could explore things differently. And I think that's what's so nice and fluid about creativity is there's so many ways to get there. Like you said, this was your way, and for many it would be great, for others it might be hard, so but I love hearing that. And I love the creativity of the creativity. You can go around it in multiple ways to get to a beautiful result, and that's great. So here is another question for you. You mentioned writer's block, and you mentioned taking walks to have a different perspective. What keeps you inspired as a whole to keep you going? In general, like, writing is your next story. Is that harder to come up with more pressure? Is it easy? How is it for you?
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of come and gone. Like yeah, I think in some ways it is a little bit harder now because I've released these books. People, they they're really loving them, but they also are like, when's the next one coming out? What are you going to do? This going to be? And I'm like, oh dear God, hopefully I can pull it off. So I think there is a little bit of pressure, and it has sometimes been a little bit harder recently. In terms of, there's, I guess, a lot of ways to answer the idea of kind of what keeps me going. I think there's something inherent in writing that I have to do it. I think it's also why I'm a psychologist, is because I just really want to understand why people do what they do. How do they, if I put them into this kind of scene or into this environment, how are they going to act? I just find it inherently interesting. So I can't go too long without writing because I get kind of grumpy. Like I'm not as happy of a person if I don't do a little bit of writing. So I think part of it's just mental health. Part of it's my just inherent interest in terms of why people do what they do. And then little things, like I'll just get inspired by a song or maybe a TV show I watch or something like that. So I think the inspiration comes from many places. I'm sure that's true for others. And that's what makes me, and plus I just, when the writing is going well, it's so rewarding. I'm sure just like any other creative pursuit. So that really keeps me motivated as well.
Speaking about that tie-in again with now the psychology and your characters, how fascinating that is to explore how this character is, how the character is responding. Why would they do these things? And I love that because psychology to me is also like an art, is this creative finding, discovery of why people are, and getting to the core of people. And art and creativity is getting to the core of happiness maybe, and purpose. And so that just really fascinates me to see that. You mentioned writing when you were younger. Were there other creative outlets that you had when you were young, and how did that affect you?
I did. Yeah, I was a creative child. I did a lot of things. I was writing, I was drawing, but probably my big passion in life from childhood all the way through high school was ballet and dance in general. I started that maybe a little later than some kids. It was kind of later in elementary school that I started, and I just got so completely invested in it. It was also a dream of mine to become a professional ballerina, which did not come true. So some dreams we pursue and some we do not. But I was in Nutcracker every year. I was doing other performances. I was doing things in the summer, and it was just an amazing way. In some ways, even when you're dancing, you are portraying a character. So it's kind of funny how all that stuff kind of comes around. So many times in my life, I don't realize how the things that happened earlier in my life are going to connect to later things, or somehow are all kind of at the core trying to explore characters and stories and things like that, because that's what ballets are. They're still stories with characters. So I love that. I loved getting to do ballet throughout my entire time. I also did color guard and marching band. And so those things are also important to me later on in high school, and were kind of creative outlets. And those things have all inspired books and ideas. So everything that I did as a child, I think, has kind of come full circle with my writing career.
So it's a good character development for every book, every thought that you might have, like how would this person act? You've had the experience of a marching band person or a theater
Yes.
or dance, and that's really that's expressing your life experiences, and you have all those characters, which is
Yeah.
great.
And when you're doing it as a child, you're just like, this is a fun thing. It's not like you're like, oh, I'm going to do these things so later on in life I have experiences to pull from. But it's funny how nowadays I can look back and think, gosh, how fun would it be to write a ballet book, or to write a marching band book, or any of those, a theater book like I did with Dungeons and Drama. All those things kind of tie together. And maybe someday I'll write like a farming book or something, because I also grew up on a farm. Who knows what'll happen? But all those little life experiences make a big difference, and I think they kind of help to feed our creativity.
I love that. I'd get that book too. All right, that's on my wish list. Sorry, you got another one.
Add it to the list.
Right. What has been your favorite creative project and why? It might not be a book, it might be a book, or it might be something else. So,
Oh, this is a hard one. I mean, I think I have to choose a book. I mean, I do have like other creative things that I've done that I really love. I do have some quilts I really love, including a baby quilt that I made for my son that's particularly a soft spot in my heart. But in terms of maybe something that was creative, that was more for me, and I feel bad because it feels like I'm choosing one of my children, but I think I have to choose Dungeons and Drama, which was my first of the D&D books, because there was something that just felt different about that book from the very beginning. I just felt like I'd kind of hit onto something, because it's about a theater girl and a gamer guy, and I kind of had this realization about how both of those worlds would really, I don't know, kind of connect and collide at the same time. And I just kind of figured that there was a lot of books already out there about that. I was like, well, there have to be. And then when I realized there wasn't, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. And there was something really exciting about that process. So that will always have a really soft spot in my heart as well. It's a book that I really love, and I'm so happy that it resonated with people.
right, that's so true. I mean, if you think back 200 years, 400 years, people were discovering things that had not been discovered before. And now it feels like everything's been done, especially with the internet and, how small the world has almost become because of that. And to find something new and unique that hasn't been touched it must be, that's exciting. And the readers are enjoying that. They're finding that, hey, she's speaking my language, she's speaking
Yeah,
Dungeons and Dragons. She's
totally.
speaking this theater thing that I love. And it gives a lot of people a voice and feeling represented in a place that they might not. And I can see that being that for people, and for you. So I love that. We are getting close to wrapping up here. I want to know, though, what creative advice would you give your past self?
Well, it is always kind of hard to think about that past self, but I think I would just tell her to be a little bit more open-minded. I think I was kind of stuck in this idea of the thing that I had to do. And I didn't even, so I'm in kind of contemporary romance, right? So contemporary times, teenagers finding love. And it took me a long time to find that, because I kind of was set in my ways. I didn't even know that was a thing. I wasn't really open to exploring different genres. And I was kind of set in this idea that maybe I was going to do fantasy, because then I love fantasy and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think maybe that wasn't where my voice was. That wasn't what I was meant to do. And it was only when I found this whole new genre of contemporary romance that I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I should have been doing. And I kind of wonder, had I been a little more open-minded and been willing to try some different genres and read in different genres, maybe I would have found that a little bit sooner. So I guess my advice to myself, although I'm happy how it all worked out, but I guess if I had to go back, I would say being that open-minded person and reading a lot and widely, I think I might have found my place a little bit sooner.
Well, that helps people who are looking to do this, so that they can think about that. What should I try? It's always things that get in the way, and that's a really good point. That try it. You never know.
Exactly. You don't know. Yeah, absolutely. You have to try it.
Wonderful. I think having you on and being our first guest has been amazing, so that we can get the writer's perspective right off the bat, because it's something that I love. And I just didn't know if there's anything else that you would like to share. Any like you've given advice and advice to yourself, but is there anything else that you wanted to share about creativity?
Well, I mean, I guess the only thing I'll say, and this is kind of coming a little bit from a psychological perspective of some stuff I've been teaching recently, is that sometimes we can get so much in our own heads, kind of over-analyzing, second-guessing everything. And if there's anything you can do to kind of get out of your head a little bit and just be more mindfully in the moment, whether it's with art or sculpture or writing, I think that could be helpful to creativity. So for me, again, the writing, another thing I do is I'll turn my font white so that I have a white on white font and background, because that also it stops me from being able to analyze all the words as I'm writing them. So it's it doesn't have to be those things, but just anything you can do to kind of just get out of your head and get out of that over analyzing perspective. I think that would I can't imagine that wouldn't help people's creativity. So I guess that would be my general thought on that.
I think that's great, because that takes us back to your other thought about doing it another way, like taking the walk, thinking of that character. And, it could be, making a sculpture of the, while your brain is going in the background and processing things, kind of like you go to sleep. You might even need a nap, and then
Right.
you might come up with the idea. No, that's great.
Sleep is always good.
Right. Where can people find you online?
Yeah. So I do have a website. It's KristyBoyceAuthor.com. Probably if you type in just Kristy Boyce, if you Google it, it'll pop up there. I'm also most active on Instagram, and my handle is Kristy L. Boyce. My middle name is Lynn, so I have an L in the middle there. And you can find me and follow me there for news and things like that.
Great. Yes, and I will have that in the show notes as well. With the links. And I am thrilled that we got to talk today and that you are our first episode guest.
I'm very honored.
Great. Oh, this was fun. And thank you to our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed the podcast and found it valuable, you can share it with others. That way we can reach people who might need a bit of inspiration in their own creative journey. I'm Becky Garish, and until next time, happy creating.
Hey there, creative minds! Are you ready for the next burst of inspiration? Make sure to subscribe to the Origins of Creativity podcast in your favorite podcast app for all our latest episodes. Visit booklandmedia.com/podcast for show details, links to connect with us, and so much more. This has been the Origins of Creativity podcast, where inspiration meets imagination.